Fine, how are you doing?
Good, thank you. Good, thank you.
Jim, I have a nice little story to tell you. I was doing a photo session today, and when I was leaving, the mom asked, she said, "How's it going over at the district? You know, everything good? Everybody likes Dr. Riley?" I was like, "Yeah, and everything's been going great. You know, lots of progress getting made." And she said, "I know it's a good thing when my 6-year-old comes home and says, 'Mom, Dr. Riley came to see me today.'" Like, he's invested.
That is nice. Thank you very much. I'll take it as I can. I'll take whatever I can get, Sherry. So thank you. Where were they? They I was over. Was it today? Because I went over to see the last part of summer school today. Was it earlier?
I don't think so.
Earlier?
Yeah, I think it was earlier.
Yeah, I'll tell you, one of my favorite moments this year is Jane Daly and I went over to Dawson and got interviewed by the first grade, and it was an absolute trip. And they did a whole section on leadership, and it was really fun.
Awesome.
And we got to do more of it. John and I were just talking, and I think one of the things I would love to model in the practice of John is, you know, his investment in getting in schools. And I've talked to my coach. I think we're going to try to take Thursday mornings and schedule it in a different, like put it in my calendar, because it's too easy to get ripped out and not do it when you want to do it. And so, you know, and I just want to say officially, I hope no one else is jealous, but I'm looking at Scott right now and not bad, my friend.
Including the new Maine flag, right? The proposed.
Scott, you're muted. And maybe frozen too.
I think he's frozen.
Yeah.
I'll text him.
I pulled it up already. Sherry.
All right, we're trying this again. Hey, yes, we're away this week. Yesterday was my 25th wedding anniversary, so we don't usually do this, but we kind of splurged on the waterfront. So it's
Nice.
Yeah, it's pretty nice out there.
Did we lose him again?
This is probably
I just
the
texted
real
him again.
story.
You might have to cut out the beautiful view for us.
Yeah.
Just for his audio.
He's back.
Move to the phone.
But you are muted, Scott.
Hello.
There we go.
Can you hear me now? Good. All right. Sorry about that. Like I said, we are away. You can all hear me though? Someone tell me. All right. I see a thumbs up. Good. Cool.
Can you hear us? You can hear us,
I
right?
can hear you. I
Right,
can hear you. Yeah, I was just saying, I don't know if you heard anything I said, but we'll just get on with the meeting and I can fill you in later. All right, so welcome. This is our first management subcommittee meeting of the year. You know, I did want to have a meeting even though I'm away this week, so that the network settings are clearly a little bit weird, but I wanted to get everybody together. So let's call the meeting to order. It is right now 7:04 p.m. And let's get going. So the first item is approval of minutes of April 10th, 2023. I wasn't in attendance at that meeting, but hopefully you've had a chance to review them. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve the minutes from April 10th, 2023?
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Second.
Lauren and a bunch of people. I think I heard Jana and Sherry. All right, we'll go to, nope, Sherry, Lauren and Sherry, close enough, or Linda. Sorry, it's hard to see online. All right, okay, so we'll have to move to our, since it's a virtual meeting, we'll have a roll call vote. I'm gonna just go in the order that I have you here. Lauren?
Sam and Gary, yes.
Jana? No. Sherry?
Haber, yes.
Linda?
Woodland, yes.
Laura?
Kirschenbaum, yes.
Hi,
And
sorry, Scott. I couldn't turn the mic on.
that's
for some
okay.
reason.
Jana?
Abstain. I wasn't there.
Okay. Malia?
Yes.
And did I miss anybody? The chair abstains. The motion passes. All right, moving on. The next item on the agenda is superintendent update. Jim, what do you got for us?
You're muted. Jim, you muted.
Every time. You know, it's so obvious when somebody else does it, and then you do it yourself. So I apologize. I was going to try to give an update, and I'm going to try to respect agenda items that are down lower, because some of it I might have folded into some of the work we're doing, and certainly happy to answer any questions if you feel like there's any omissions in what I'm providing to you. I was going to almost go department by department. I think it makes probably the most sense in some of the work that we've been doing this summer. Start with human resources. I had communicated to the committee. We're continuing to work to support that department. We've been meeting twice weekly and has met with our legal counsel twice in the last 6 days, I believe. And so our focus is going to be in HR to support new hires, to make sure that we're starting the year fully staffed. And I will say that principals have done a nice job with filling vacancies, and that in most of our schools, the majority of our vacancies have been filled. We have a couple of ones that are lingering. That happens at times, but overall, I'm pretty happy in terms of where we stand in terms of processing new employees. The other thing we're really trying to focus on, and I would admit to you, and I shared this the other day with the chair and with Lauren when we had an update, we need to continue to work on our processes between HR and business, because we continue in business, we continue to work and try to finalize our FY23 closure, but also complete our FY22 audit. And because they continue to be mired in that previous work, we continue to want to put more time into creating efficiencies and following in on the recommendations of our CLA report. And I think we've reached a point where we'll probably be talking to the full committee about trying to create or having a hybrid position that would look at our employee systems, because that really is something that we continue to struggle with. And I think that's why the focus for us is not only going to be onboarding new employees, but also making sure that we have the right information to the business office. So when we start to issue paychecks again and employees come back to work, that information is accurate. That's one of our foundational needs down here in central office, and some work that it needs to get better this year. It's not, and I think what I would want to be clear about, it certainly isn't due to lack of effort for the people who are currently in their positions. I feel like our HR staff, I've been pleased, honestly, with the meetings I've had with them this past week and the efforts that they're doing, because we're asking some people to do work that they're not normally accustomed to doing. And I would say in the business office, we've endured some changes since the end of the year. We're fully staffed again, but we do have a new assistant business manager, Michelle White. And then we also have a payroll specialist in Cecilia Lowe, who have come back to the district. And even though it's nice that they have some capacity and familiarity with the district, that type of turnover that we continue to deal with has been difficult. But we are fully staffed down there again, and I think that's great. And I would say our business department, in my opinion, has made great strides in terms of the work that they're doing and how hard they're working. I mean, I don't know, but I think Michelle just left, and that's common for Michelle. It's pretty incredible the hours that they're all putting in. And it's not only Michelle. I think they're all working extremely hard. And the same thing, we had folks in HR here about half an hour ago. So, I feel like, and what I'd share with the committee is that's something that we need to continue to look at. It's not a question of effort, but it is a question of resources. And I think we're going to have to look at that as a staffing component soon. We've posted to see if we can get some interest in working on our systems and specifically addressing the CLA recommendations, because until we get that work done, we're going to continue to have to deal with some mistakes. And I think our employees deserve better, and we can't do our best work when we're constantly fixing things. So that's HR and business. Some really happy news. Lara DeRose, who is our new curriculum director, started on August, and John could give an update on that, but he stops and says to her, I don't know, at least 8 times a day that he's very thankful for her and how happy he is that she's joined the district. She comes from Worcester. John can give you a little bit of her bio, but she's been a great add and somebody who we're immediately involving in a lot of the work that we're doing in district. We also, I would not be surprised if we have an announcement by the end of the week, or certainly by the school committee meeting, that we will have hopefully appointed a student support services director. And those interviews, we had some final interviews on Tuesday, and I think they'll hopefully be selecting and finalizing hopefully an offer and an acceptance from a candidate by the end of the week. So at that point, we really will be fully staffed, and I think that will be great for central office kind of as we move forward. The focus when we get together as a group right now has really been planning for our administrative retreat, which happens next week after our school committee meeting. We're really, and one of the things you'll see at the school committee meeting is we're going to present some of the major themes that we're going to be working on this year in the district. Things like, continuing to work with MTSS, our strategic plan, and I know that's an agenda item later on, and John and I can share some of the update and the work that we've done on that thus far. And then also continuing some of the work we've done in terms of security, Alice, certainly continuing to look at our use of data, but we're pretty excited, and we feel like obviously there's a lot to accomplish in the district, but we also think we have a good pulse on work that we can dig into this year that's going to start to make a difference for kids. One thing I didn't mention, I'm sorry, I clicked off my notes, but Joan DeAngelis has started in special education. I've been nothing but impressed by Joan, and John had experience working with Joan before. The work that Joan's inheriting is tough, and I would say that we've talked about it before, and it's one of the things that I've shared as one of the areas that we need to concentrate on very much in terms of our students and how we provide services. But some of that means questioning practices that we've done before as a district. And, just a quick thing I'd share about special education is that we had been a lot of times approving placements to programs that weren't reimbursable through the state because they weren't approved special education programs. And I think at times we responded when things reached a certain level. Instead of trying to do the right thing, we did the easy thing. And so I think there's going to be a natural course correction for a lot of the things that we're trying to establish here in the district. However, I have great faith in the work she's doing and how she's trying to approach it. I know it's going to be mean change. I know we're going to have to do some work. Today, we accepted an invitation from CPAC to speak. I think we're scheduled to do it the first week in October. And so both Joan and I will be speaking to CPAC again to share some of the work that's going to be underway and the philosophy and what we're trying to establish in the district. And I think it's going to be one of the best things that's happened. And I'm very excited for what can happen here because I feel like we're going to be able to establish the use of resources that's going to benefit all kids. And so, I've been impressed in the first, I think she's worked with us now about a month. And so I really think we're headed in the right direction in all those areas. So I know we're going to talk about strategic planning. I know we're going to talk about facilities and space issues moving forward, but certainly happy to answer any questions or things that people are wondering about that I may have omitted. Or John, if you want to jump in and you feel like there's something you want to add, please do so.
John, if you're talking, you're muted. We can't hear you.
No, I didn't have anything to add. Happy to answer questions.
Okay. Any questions about that part of the superintendent's update? I don't see any questions. Anything else, Jim, before we move on?
Not that I can think of. We've been busy,
Yes.
but we're looking forward to it. I think a lot of the stuff, what I would share, I'm getting excited in that we're talking about work that's we're going to hopefully be able to talk about kids this year, and so much. And I don't want to, and you'll see this in our report kind of next week when we talk about the business. And our business department, we're living in one less fiscal year, but the truth is we're still finishing up the FY22 audit now, and we still need to close out FY23. So I'm trying to find the balance of sharing the fact that we still are digging out, and that's why I mentioned the CLA report. And we are down one right now in central office for the time being. But that's going to be temporary, and we're going to, we have talent there, which I feel really good about. But we need to try to also poise ourselves to creating some sense of urgency about some of the things we want to address and move forward. I've shared before, when we look at our data, we have to be mindful that we may not be making the gains that we want to make. And so, I think that's the focus of a lot of the work that we're trying to do this year. And we're excited to get it underway and work with the staff, because I I probably don't say it enough. I think we do have a lot of invested, caring people who want to make a difference in kids' lives. And I think the message I'm trying to resonate with this year is that people care too much and work too hard for us not to make sure that we're absolutely doing the right things to get the absolute best results we can for those efforts.
Thanks, Jim. And as you mentioned, some of the stuff I think you were going to update us on is on the agenda later, so you can clearly jump in when we have those items. All right, so we're going to move on to yes.
Laura had her hand raised.
Oh, sorry, Laura. I didn't. The phone screen is small, but Laura,
That's okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. I just want to say that I know the work that you're doing at central office and getting us working on all cylinders. I think that is fabulous work that you're doing, getting the right people. You continue to impress me in how you're able to onboard the right people in the right positions. And I look forward to the conversations when we can see the direct correlation between who's in charge and how that's improving the lives of our students. I just want to also reiterate, I think, something that has been said before, and that has to do with personnel concerns that have come up. Of course, we receive some emails from our constituents about some of the personnel issues, and I know that some of those issues are confidential because they are personnel issues. But I wonder if there's some mechanism that we can have that would allow us to kind of close the loop on that, so that those concerns don't just kind of dissipate out into space. And so, I know that there's been some concerns and there's been some changes that have been made, but I just wonder if there's some way that we can communicate that the district is responsive to the concerns, so that we can add some closure to those situations.
So clarification. Are we talking mostly like concerns with employees? Is that what we're talking about, Laura, or just concerns with experiences?
A little bit of both, I
Okay.
think. I think that you've responded, at least this year, I've seen evidence that you've responded to circumstances and experiences. And so, continue on that pathway, but also I think it has to do with personnel issues, and I appreciate that they're confidential. I appreciate that they're sensitive. But I think that we do need to kind of close the loop on that.
Understood. I think, that's one thing I did not mention, and it is one of the reasons that we are consulting with legal counsel, is to make sure that we're following the appropriate procedures to make sure we have a learning environment that reflects the experience we want to have for all of our kids. And it is tricky for us in terms of what we can and can't comment on in terms of personnel matter. I guess what I would share with the committee is that we're taking these things extremely seriously. I would say that's an area where I feel like the district had opportunity to improve. I don't think I think the bottom line is people entrust us with their kids, and they expect their kids to be safe and to have an experience that's going to be supportive and healthy for them. And I think we have to take that extremely seriously. And in terms of the other piece, and the reason why I was asking about the communication, I'm actually meeting with Randy on Friday, and we've talked about, and one of the things we've been working, or honestly, Joan DeAngelis worked on it for us, is looking at our flow chart and trying to make sure we have a better system in place so people know where to go with their concerns. And the other thing that we're trying very hard to do is to try to set an expectation that when people have concerns, they first go through their buildings or their particular department. And so one of the things we've experienced at times is it feels like people jump and they go right to our office at times and want an issue to be resolved. But it's important, I think, a lot of times, and not some of the issues you're talking about, Laura, I want to acknowledge, not that stuff, but in general, what we're going to try to communicate to our families is please make sure you've had a conversation at the building level if there's a concern about the school. And most certainly, if you don't think that's been resolved to your satisfaction, they should be able to expect that we're going to respond and have a meeting with them if necessary or whatever. But similar, and it's why I mentioned some of our departments, we're really hoping that people use the resources in a particular department, such as special education, and give folks that opportunity to resolve any concerns they have first before moving it on to another level. Because those are truly the people in the building case who have the most experience with their particular child, and in the department who have the particular experience to solve whatever issues they're talking about. But we have to get more proactive about that, and we have to do a better job of making sure that people know they've been heard, or we know that they have concerns, and be better about directing them to where they need to go in a timely manner. And so I need to own that, and that's why I was asking, because I think that's something that's underway and has to be, because I don't want people to think we don't care. It's not that we don't care, but we also don't want to disempower the people who truly have probably the most ability to make a difference in their kids' experience. And so, but that's something I'd say I've established is something I need to get better at this year and put in better systems in the district.
Thank you.
Any other questions before we move on? All right, let's move on to subcommittee updates. First one is diversity. Malia, do you have an update for us?
Yes. Just give me 1 second, because
No problem.
We didn't get to it at our last school committee meeting. I don't believe
Right.
so. I can just have to dig up my notes, which were in that folder. Sorry.
You don't, of course. I mean, you know this, but you don't have to give the full report that you're going to give it school
No,
committee,
no,
because
I
we're gonna
know.
do that on
I just
Monday.
hit
But
some of the
yeah,
key
yeah.
points.
Yes.
I can. All right. Well, I'm going to do it without all my notes then, because they're in another folder. So I apologize. I I will say we spent a majority of the meeting, or a lot of the meeting. We talked about what we have going forward and what we plan to be doing this year. We talked a lot and spent a lot of time working on the anti-bullying policy. I'd say we got about halfway through it, but we have some questions going forward, and we also will return to it to finish the other portion of it. We're going to work all the way through it and then send all the questions to legal counsel at once for their opinions and clarification. I don't know if we're going to get back to it in our next meeting, because we actually have one of the things we've talked about is finding ways to hear more about what's going on in our schools, and from both students and faculty and principals, and really invite people to inform us on what's going on, and what things we need to be aware of, because otherwise we're kind of operating in a silo based on what we think the most important issues are, which is helpful. So we do have a number of principals coming to our next meeting, and I think John said there are 6 perhaps that have said that they are interested in coming to talk with us, which is more than I imagined. The week before school starts, it's on the 23rd, I believe. So that will be our priority at our next meeting, and if we get to other things, we will get to them. But since there are so many of them and their time's limited, that's going to be our next priority, to hear what they would like to share with us about their efforts, about what they think we need to be working on, what we need to be aware of. So I wanted to create more of a, as we've done with many things, more of a dialogue, and an opportunity for people to share with us what the impact of what we're doing is, and what the administration is doing. A lot of things, we're creating policies. We just want to make sure that we really know what the experience is. So that's one of our main goals. We did set some other priorities for the year, which I don't have in front of me right now. And there's something, the holidays we're also going to address early in the year. That's one of the things I believe the principals have some thoughts on, about how that actually shows up in the schools, what things they need some clarification on. So their participation will inform that discussion as well at our next meeting or the one after it. So that's what I have so far.
Okay, thanks, Malia. Is there anything that you need to have on the agenda for the meeting on Monday? We have one more day to set the agenda. So I wanted to ask anyone if there's anything that they needed to put on.
Don't believe so. I don't think we
Okay.
took any action because we didn't finish the policy. We have a lot more to do. So
Okay.
don't believe so. And if I've forgotten something, hopefully people will correct me. But I will also double check tonight.
Okay. Yep. I have to, midday tomorrow, I need to get Randy the final agenda. So just if anyone,
don't think
this
there
goes
is.
for everybody, if you have
But I will let you
anything,
know.
please let me know. Okay, great. Thank you. All right, moving on, business and finance. Jana?
Hi. I don't really have any updates. We haven't met since before our last school committee meeting. Because I was supposed to be away, ended up not being away, but I was supposed to be away. So we're actually not meeting till next Thursday.
Okay.
So I really don't have any updates. I haven't heard anything. I need to work on the agenda over the next couple of days with Michelle and Jim, if you have anything to add, because you were bringing up new positions that you wanted to discuss. If you wanted to discuss that more after the main school committee meeting, because again, we're meeting after that meeting. So I should have more updates after meeting next Thursday. Part of what, obviously we'll be getting updates on FY22 and FY23. But part of what I want to work out with Michelle is sort of our plan for the year, now that we're a little more back on track on when we should get updates in certain areas, like treasurer reports and other areas, things that will be monthly, things that will be quarterly. I'd like to set that up ideally at our next meeting if we can, so that we kind of expect what's coming over the course of the year. And that's pretty much where we're at. I haven't had any major updates through email or anything, so.
Okay. I did see, I think the budget was signed today. The governor signed the budget. So I think we actually have final budget numbers. Yeah.
Yes.
We do.
Oh, also we have the free
lunch.
lunch.
Nice.
So that will be something else to discuss. I don't know that it affects our budget or not, but you know,
One thing
that's
I think,
something
one
else
thing
to
that
look
might
at
be,
because I can't remember if that's in our budget or not.
okay. One other thing, I think the transportation is going to be higher than what we originally estimated. So it might just be, I have not thought about this yet, but I don't know what happens to that extra funding if it does come. So it might be something for business and finance to talk about.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll definitely also put that on the agenda. Off the top of my head, my guess is it'll go into some sort of transportation revolving or maybe special ed transportation because we were way over on that last year. But again, top of my head, I see Jim nodding over there. But yeah, that will also definitely be on the agenda now that we have assigned budget to see kind of where we're at comparatively.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting anyone to know what we're going to do with it right now. Just something to discuss at the next business and finance.
No, but yes, that is also something that we'll be discussing now that we actually have numbers on that. So.
Okay, I saw a number of hands go up, but I don't know what order they were in, and I can't see on my phone. Sherry, do you know what order the hands were up?
Laura, Jim, Malaya. Oh,
okay,
Malaya's hands down now, but Laura, Jim, Malaya.
All right, Laura.
Thank you. So Jenna, as I recall in our last school committee meeting, there was I believe it was a motion that was passed to have a sort of a lessons learned report on how it sounds like there's some things that you're already implementing that are going to, help move forward. But I'm wondering if that is on the immediate agenda, if that's something that you're working on throughout this year. I don't recall a timeline or a deadline being set. So I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that.
So the deadline for that was December. So I will have it on the agenda, but it might be a rolling item. A lot of it is really going to be Michelle and Jim pulling information and kind of compiling it. But since FY22 and 23 aren't completely done, I was hoping that would be finished before we could truly do the report, because I feel like we need to finish it before we can report back on it in its entirety. But that will be on the agenda as far as a plan for how we want to get it done by December.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. I think you were next.
Nope, thank you. I was just going to comment on a couple of things. I had asked the same question about the additional transportation to Michelle. As I understood her, some of that was one of the transfers we made through stabilization at our school committee meeting in June, but I could be wrong. And so we'll try to get an update on that. In terms of the free lunch, just to share, what that has the biggest impact on is on our food services revolving account, because that's where that money goes into. And so it allows us, and Linda Woodland, but I could be wrong. Apologize in advance. We'll try. She's already heard me share this during a recent visit to TPS. So it's going to be very good for us in terms of, one of the nice things and one of the reasons why we had so much in our food revolving account was because we had far more students accessing our lunch because of the state and federal support of that program for the last 3 years. One of the nice things we did do at the end of the year is, on the recommendation of our food service coordinator, is we increased our lunch rates. And we did that in part through a recommendation when we had the program audited, but also because that is the level in which we are eligible for reimbursement. And so we'll be maximizing that return to the district, and we'll make those funds even more healthy. And one of the things, and I'm not sure we'll probably be ready to do it at August meeting, but we have done a lot of work in all of our towns. I know we're familiar with the fact that we supported the replacement of the Paxton Hood, but we've been doing work at all of our schools, a storage area and loading dock at Naquag. They created a new store. They've all gotten new washers and dryers for their equipment. We were at Thomas Prince the other day. They had new ovens. So they've done a lot of nice work with those funds, using them in the appropriate areas, because that money should go back into our food services, and they have done a really nice job. So that's really nice news, because we have kids who we know we haven't always identified who might be food insecure or placed at risk. And so the fact that all of our kids, without feeling like they need to be identified in any manner, are going to have that benefit, I think we're really happy with. The other thing, and this makes me go back what Malia had said earlier, the other thing we've talked about as a district, and I can't give you a defined plan, is we really are going to try to work to better identify her kids who may be at risk, because one of the challenges in the last few years, because we've had free lunch throughout, is we have to wonder if we're identifying all of our kids who may need support for things that we charge fees at, especially at the high school level. We don't want anybody to have a compromised experience because they may not have the requisite funds, or have not, don't know what channels they can go through to have things offered at a reduced rate or a free rate. So we're going to try to make sure we're wrapping our heads around doing some work around that, which I think Malia and John had talked about at a previous diversity committee, and I think we had before when Member Kirschenbaum was on the committee and leading the committee as well. So that's work we've identified and are hoping to do a better job with this year, for all of those above reasons. And then, not, and I said this the other day, not just because it's the right thing, not just because we want to support those families, but it will also help us better identify our populations that we're working with in Wachusett. And we know the identified group that we are struggling with the most, at least academically through DESE, is our high needs kids, and that's special education, our English learners, and our kids who are coming from a lower socioeconomic situation. And so those are groups that we really do need to concentrate on and making sure we're supporting. So just wanted to add that piece, because I think the free lunch thing is great, and I think we need to also make sure that we're continuing that work. And we're thrilled about the transportation and the cherry sheets, and we ended in a nice place, even better than I believe the original proposal. So we feel really good about all that. So thank you.
Great. Any other questions? All right, education is next, but Linda is on vacation this week, so she couldn't be here. So we'll move on unless anyone has yes, Sherry.
Malia had one more thing to mention about diversity.
Oh, you did? Okay, sorry. I didn't see your hand up. Go ahead.
No, it's super quick and it could have waited. But I did just this morning, MASC had a webinar about from the Safe Schools program and resiliency for LGBTQ students. It was a fantastic presentation. It was 2 hours long, not your typical webinar. And it was someone from the state who does this for a living under their Safe Schools program. It was fantastic. And when I get the slides, I will share them. We are doing most of the things that they suggested, but there's a whole section we didn't get to, and they're going to have a follow-up in the fall. So that was good news. And I also at the MASC Summer Institute, which I also attended, there were two things related to diversity. One was a session on equity audits and resources available. Again, we're doing more than we think we are. And the other, there was a session from MIAA, which did mention some of the issues related to sports and equity, although most of it is read this online, but at least I found out where to go to read the information. So there just that reminded me of it because it was today, and I'm sorry to interject, but it was, I wish everyone could have gone to the session today because it's something I think everyone should hear. And it wasn't hitting you over the head. It was just, these are some of the issues. These are some, like, this is the real experience of people and how we can address some of them. So it was a great session. So sorry.
Thanks, Malia. So I was just going to say, does anyone have anything on education that they'd like to add? Linda's not here, so we won't have an update, but since it's on the agenda, anyone want to speak to education
no,
sub?
I don't,
Janet,
but I was just going to say thank you to Malia for attending all of those offerings. And I look forward to seeing the slides from the webinar. I'd really like to catch up on those. So thank you for that.
Scott, I can talk about it sub if you'd like.
Oh, sure, John. Yeah, please. Go ahead.
So really, we're just doing like a data dive at this point in preparation for kind of thinking about some strategic plan work and trying to give, like, I think one of the goals is to empower folks on accessing data and using the tools that DESI has, because I don't know that everybody is like aware of the real rich, vast data that DESI collects on behalf of the districts. And so that was work that Jane had kind of got started for us, and that's been a big initiative in that subcommittee so far.
Thanks, John. All right, so we're going to move on to facilities and security, and we do have a few things to talk about. So first, Linda, do you have an update for us?
Yeah, I can give a general update and then go into the specific bullets.
Sure.
So this is kind of the main time of work for the facilities subcommittee over the summer, getting ready to have the capital improvement plan updated and presented to the full school committee by the end of October. Just to note, like right now we have October 2nd as our only school committee or last school committee meeting set before that October 31st deadline. Mark Wild seemed fine with that, with aiming for having it ready for October 2nd versus October 31st. But if that changes, then I just wanted to give a heads up that there may be a request for a special meeting in October. But okay. I think it should probably be fine. Jim, you're gonna know that way better than me. So we started the building tours this summer. And we're doing a reduced one from last year. Last year was to just get the ball rolling on getting every school covered. From here on out, we're going to try to do, we called it feet in every town. So we have at least one school in every town that we do a tour of over the summer. And so we've done 3 of them so far. From here, I think that this is probably where to move on. So the capital requests for this past year, we had recommended them in October, and then they went before the towns to figure out how they want to approach those projects. And so some of our towns took on the security projects, and some of our towns did not. And so that was what I was hoping that just to bring to the committee's attention on where we stand. And then also we had the Dawson tour. It was just before I went on vacation, so apologize, I have a bit of vacation brain still. But the the main issue there is what to do about space. It's been a problem presented to the town. I mean, I've seen documentation of ideas and plans presented to them since 2019. It's not a new issue, but it keeps getting treated as if it is. And so now that we have the population we have and the teachers approved and the classrooms approved, we're at this tough point of what do we do. And so, Jim, if you want to take it from here, that would be great.
No, thanks, Linda. And so I've got some new news on some of that. And just to tell you, I met with Joy Wild and Mark Wild in terms of us having a contingency plan. I also had a meeting today. It was over the telephone, but it was a scheduled meeting with Peter Lukes of Holden to talk about our plan. And Peter has agreed. He had made outreach to his business finance subcommittee in Holden and breached the topic of supporting our lease with some portables. The district's not in a position where it's appropriate use of district funds to, support those portables, whether we're buying or leasing them. And I think Holden understands that. Peter is going to attempt, my understanding from my conversation with Peter today is for them to support the use of portables, whether it's this year or if it's going to be this year. They would have to use what he referred to as reserve cash. I guess I believe it's, I don't know whether it's the town or the business finance, there's $150,000 that the town reserves to be used for unanticipated expenses. They have to go through a process where it's kind of vetted as an unanticipated expense and then vote whether or not it meets the conditions. I guess when we had an issue, Linda, going back, we did some work, I think it was on the boilers over at Mayo. I believe it was last year. And I guess those were the funds that were used to support that project. They have a meeting that is scheduled in September. And Peter said that he would request to see if they could maybe do one even earlier. I have suggested, because I think one of the things we want to identify is the right process that Holden would like us to use if we're missing a step, to make sure that we're going through a process where they feel like they've gotten any information they need to make the best decision they can. I definitely believe that we're not going to find a better deal than our current lease arrangement that Mark Wilds found in terms of having portable classrooms at Dawson. I'm not sure Peter disagrees. I think it's a question of, is that an appropriate use of those funds, and can we get the support? And then also, will the portables still be available if we can't do that until September or later? And that's not even a guarantee that we could do it this year. I think both what Peter and I spoke about, though, it would be good to go through the process and make sure we've officially documented that this is a need for Dawson. Even if it doesn't get done this year, it needs to get done next year. Now, if it doesn't get done, and what we are preparing to do is to have a contingency plan in the event, because even if they approve it, we wouldn't be talking about, and if those portables are still available, because there's only one, 2 portable classroom that's available that we know of. And so if for some reason that's not available, and honestly, based on when they may vote for it, we wouldn't have it, I would think, until the earliest October, or probably even more likely November. We'd have to have a plan in place to start the school year. And so we've met and we've looked at, we had talked about, we haven't, and I'll say this, I'm sharing this with the committee, and we need to communicate this to the Dawson community in terms of an update, because there isn't complete closure on this yet. We're continuing to work on it. But our plan is to look to have a division in the library that is not permanent, okay, that uses portable dividers, that would allow, specifically, we're looking at special education pull-out services to be provided in that area, and then repurposing their staff room, and then also repurposing another area that right now is used for special education services. We're trying to be ready for anything, but the most important thing is that those new teachers have a space to get ready for a good opening of school, and that we have some flexibility and continue to advocate with what we think is the best long-term solution and in the best interest of kids, which is the addition of portable classrooms in that area. And I'd say it was a good meeting with Peter today, and so hopefully we're going to continue to partner and work towards that. That would be the next step, is trying to schedule that meeting. And I've offered and let him know I am willing to talk to anybody and present to anybody about our needs, whether it be the Business Finance Committee, the Select Board, or whoever he feels like it would be helpful. So that's where we are in that one. Just an aside, because I think sometimes when we talk about Dawson, we talk about it as a symptom of our immediate needs in district, but we all know there are long-term needs as well. And that's why we talk about the facility task force. We've sent a tentative date, and I guess, Linda, I talked to Randy today. I think she has shared that with your subcommittee in terms of a date of September 14th. That was chosen at the last town manager meeting that I held. And so we have to send official invites to Princeton and Holden because they weren't able to make that meeting. We had vacations that were interrupting and a conflict, but send their invites. We've talked to, but we know that Paxton, Rutland, and Sterling can all attend on that date. And so we have that tentative date, which is good. I think we're excited about that. So that seems to be moving in the right direction. And our goal will be to kick that off on September 14th. And that will hopefully help with the long-term needs of the district.
Did I see Malia's hand go up?
Yes.
Yep. Malia?
Yes, I appreciate your detailed update on the Dawson situation, and I was wondering where that stood because I was on that tour. I do have a question for you. You'd mentioned that there hasn't been an update to the Dawson community yet. I think that obviously you kind of have conveyed until today there wasn't a big update. So I think it is important to update them, as well as perhaps copy at least those of us in Holden who may get questions about it. My second question is there anything, because we might be asked this, is there anything that either we as school committee members from Holden or elsewhere, or the community, once they are aware of the situation, can do to help encourage this process along? For example, encouraging the town to have a meeting sooner because it's something that's really important. And they can do that just as we can. So I'm just asking because I know when the parents hear that they may have this situation when school starts, and I've seen those spaces, one of them is not ideal. It's an L space. The parents are not going to be thrilled. And the idea of starting school and then changing classrooms, we all know, is not ideal. So if there is anything that we can do to encourage them or let them know, I know parents are like itching to go to the board of selectmen or wherever they need to go in the town to advocate for whatever needs done. They have told me. So I don't know what to advise them. I've told them we don't have an update yet, but they want to do those things as part of their democratic role as a citizen. And I know there's board of selectmen meetings before then, and I know FinCom can meet earlier if they want to or need to, because they have. So I guess that's my two questions, especially once you inform them, what can we do without interrupting the things that you're already doing, but to perhaps encourage this process to move forward a little more quickly in the interest of our students?
Yeah. And so I guess what I would share is that, I didn't have an update before today. We did send an official communication. I think the week I was off, we sent a letter requesting a meeting and a conversation to see where we stood. I know Peter was on vacation last week. We traded several phone calls and weren't able to connect. And so that's a hard one for me. Okay. And I'll share that it's hard because when I talk about wanting to develop healthy partnerships with the towns and trying to respect their needs and their process, I want to be a good partner, and I don't what do I feel like? I would love it if we could find a way to have the portables in place, because I feel like it's, at least from what I've come across, our best, both short and possibly longer term needs of that building until we can figure out, what is the long-term space solution, whether it's an addition, a new school building, or whatever the town decides. But what I also don't want is to create a false narrative for people. It's hard for me. I'd say that Peter said he's going to check it out. I'd like to give Peter a chance to follow the process that he feels like is appropriate in his town, and try to keep that. I don't know, to answer your question, much like for people who ask me how do things work, for the school committee, and may feel like it's a slope, not for school committee, but the district, the process we go through to approve policies or things of that nature. It's hard for me to speak to that. And what I don't want to do is create a level of stress on the system that isn't gonna, that's gonna harm a partnership instead of help it. But I'm not saying that would happen, and that's where it's hard for me. You understand what I'm saying?
I do. That's actually why I was asking.
And that's what I struggle with. And so I'm going to be honest with you, right? I do feel like, and this is one of the reasons why we're moving forward with a facility task force. My concern is that we haven't done enough things proactively from the district side and potentially from the town side. I don't know. I can't speak from that. I don't work for our towns, but I do know that we've entered into a crisis point where we got to get moving quickly about what we're going to do in terms of potential space needs, both in terms of population growth and then possibly population decline in all 5 of our communities. And we need to give thought about what's the best way to address those issues that's going to benefit kids. So that's why we're doing the facility task force. For the shorter term things, it's harder for me because I don't have the historical knowledge. Do you know what I mean? I wasn't in the room when we may have talked about, space issues in the past, or whatever communication has happened, or whatever studies have been commissioned. I wasn't in the organization at that time. And so I try very hard to concentrate on my own personal experience, and to try to own my own part of that, and to try to develop appropriate systems so we can move forward in the right way. But the bottom line is, I'll be very clear, like I do feel like that there's a concern there. I feel like what we're going to end up doing is a Band-Aid. I would have communicated it sooner, but my hope is that we're going to find some way to get this done. And I'm still holding on to that hope, because I feel like that's what's best for the kids. And I think Peter knows that. And I'm hoping that we're going to find a way to get this done possibly this year.
So
Jim,
we'll cross the fingers, and students may, or parents may take things into their own hands and do what they want anyways. But as far as we're concerned, we don't have any real direction. Okay.
I don't at this time. I'm going to continue to try to develop a partnership. That's where I'm at.
No, that's fine. That's exactly why I was asking.
I understood, and thank you. And that's what I thought you were asking. And so I appreciate, Malia. And it's a legitimate question, right? It's a legitimate question.
I totally understand where you're coming from in terms of building the relationship, but I had a similar question to Malia, just in terms of timing. I mean, ultimately, it's not up to me to decide for Holden whether they spend the money or not. But I think we do need to communicate the fact that doing this sooner rather than later would be the best thing. Like, obviously, if you could have the classrooms there for the first day of school, I don't know if that's possible, but that would be the best case scenario. The Finance Committee could move quickly. I think they could vote on this next week if they wanted to. There's nothing stopping them from doing that. Obviously, we want them to be able to have the data that they need to make a good decision, but they only need 48 hours to schedule a meeting, and then it's a reserve fund transfer, which they have the power to approve. So absolutely continue building the relationship, but maybe we just want to sort of express that there is some urgency, both because we don't know if these classrooms will be available, and ideally we would like to have them in place as soon as possible. Maybe you already did that, but
that was expressed today.
I
will tell you, I said that exact thing. And my concern, what I will share with the committee, is that that my fear is that these may not be available. And I think that then we've lost an opportunity to really have a really cost-effective and appropriate facility solution. And it's hard to know if that's going to come apart again. Like, these actual portables that we're talking about are 1 year old. They were used by Acton Boxborough previously for testing, and they're in really good shape. And I feel like the least we've been offered is good. And so I have shared both my fear that these may no longer be available if we don't act sooner than later, and then also that this truly is the best solution for space. And one of the things that was relayed to me today, and I don't think I'm talking out of school, horrible expression to use given that we're at school committee right now, but that he would request and to see if there is an ability to try to get a meeting sooner rather than later. But he had told me one was scheduled for September. And so,
Thank you, Jim.
You got it.
I think I saw Janice's hand go
up. Yeah, so Jim, you keep mentioning that they might not be available. Before we have everyone go nuts, can we call and find out if they are available?
They are available, and they were holding them for us. But what happens?
They are holding. That was my next question. Is there a way to do some sort of deposit on them?
No, we can't, because for me to use district money, and if I don't know that I will be reimbursed as the district, and so I would sign the lease, but I can't sign the lease on behalf of the district because this isn't appropriate use of district funds. This is a facility issue. Facilities are owned by towns. Towns need to finance anything to do with facilities, especially what has to do with space. And so I can tell you that we've been in constant contact. We've asked for different iterations of the contract, and we've asked people to continue to hold them. But as it would be with any business, right, if they have another person who's interested and willing to sign a contract, they are not going to hold them for us. I can't control that. And so we have continued to try to work with them. We've been transparent with this company and letting them know the situations we're dealing with. And I'm just trying to be honest with everyone that we could potentially lose them. Right now we haven't. We have continued to express our interest as a school district, letting them know that we're extremely interested. But there's another piece, the financing piece, that we don't have a whole lot of control over.
So my next question is there a way to ask Peter Lukes, is there a way to do a deposit that holds it for us that could, I understand, could potentially be lost, that the town could put down while they are trying to figure it out to secure that we have them if they can't do it right away, as a show of good faith that we at least have the units on hold, as opposed to paying for them full outright? Is that something that the town could do to make sure that we retain being able to use them?
I can communicate that request. My concern, or what I think he would tell me, is that he doesn't know, right? And so I don't know how the their business finance would look at this and whether or not it would be appropriate use of their funds, and that they would say that this should have been potentially an anticipated need, not an unanticipated need. You know, I think in my mind, we didn't know if we were going to get the 2 teachers, and we didn't know exactly what our numbers were going to look like. And so I don't know, again, like, I don't know what funding source they would use to do that. All I can tell you is, like, we've taken it pretty seriously over here. And we've done everything we can, and feel like we've taken as far as we can from the district level. You know, you could make the argument that that wasn't even our place to do that work, you know.
Jim, I think the sentiment that I've gotten from our conversations with Mark have been the company's looking for not necessarily a deposit, but a signature, right? Like, they're looking for somebody to sign
the contract. Absolutely,
Yeah.
Jim.
Right.
And if they have somebody else who's going to sign the contract, you know, we're talking about effectively a 3-year or 4-year lease, which is going to be between $150,000 and $20,000. And if someone's willing to sign that contract, or whatever terms they negotiate, that's what they're going to look for. You're absolutely right, Joe. What they want is the use of the portables that are currently on a vacant lot. The more they can secure revenue for that lease. And thank you, John. You're right. That's a good way of putting it in place.
Okay.
That's what they're hoping for.
For my own
And
sorry, go ahead.
oh, sorry. I was going to say,
ahead,
my last point just goes back to what Malia was asking about and what Scott was saying, as far as you know, outreach with the public, and the public making their opinion known to FinCom, BOS, and town management. And I understand that you want to have a good working rapport with the town of Holden. But I also know that we don't have to do it completely one-sided, where there are things that come up with the school district on our end, where Board of Selectmen are making posts on Facebook and negatively talking about us with no qualms whatsoever. They don't get to just tell people to descend and talk to us. Well, we, you know, if we're sharing information, people obviously have the right to express their opinion to the people who govern their town. And so I don't want people to not express their opinion out of fear that someone might retaliate. Like, that's not a great relationship to me. That's us being kind of bullied, in my opinion.
Yeah,
and so I do understand there's a give and take, and we have to, at some point, someone has to be the better person. But I just wanted to kind of put it out there that I don't want to be that we have to shirk, and people who attend our schools can never say anything to our Board of Selectmen for things that our students need, whereas they can the opposite way, if that makes sense. I just kind of needed to get that off my chest.
Scott, you okay if I respond?
Yeah, go ahead, Jim.
Absolutely agree. I think what I was trying to say is, I don't want to advocate, as the chosen leader of the school system right now, to say that I feel like I'm being dealt with in a way that I'm continuing to pursue these channels. I'm continuing to hopeful that the processes will play out, and that we will be able to secure them. I'm worried about the timeline. You know, as I've been fully transparent tonight. I just said it about the portables. I'm afraid of losing them. You know, I think I'm being as transparent as I can be. That said, I also don't want to advocate or give people misinformation, and I don't think any of you do either. Let me make that clear. And so I think people can follow their own will in terms of what they feel like the appropriate course of advocacy is at any time. But what I don't want to do is to send into people presenting alternative narratives in terms of the work that needs to be done in our partnership. I want to stay focused on why we should be doing things, which is in the best interest of our citizens and our students specifically in the town of Holden. And that's why I'm trying to approach it the way I am.
Thanks, Jim. Laura, you have your hand up.
Thank you. And I just want to make sure that I'm clear about the current situation. As you've, I think, articulated, we have an offer of a lease. We have the need for these two portables. We've made that argument clear to the town, and the town now needs to find the resources to be able to sign that lease. What I don't hear is a date other than sometime in September when FinCom is meeting. I don't hear a date saying when the town of Holden is going to hold an emergency FinCom meeting to present this information, to then vote on making those funds available. And it's the FinCom that needs to vote that, or is it the Board of Selectmen?
I believe it's the FinCom.
Okay.
That was my understanding. And I would so the conversation today was, Peter said that there was a scheduled meeting in September, but he was going to see if that could be moved up, or request that there could possibly be a meeting even sooner.
Yeah.
But when I spoke to him, I think we spoke at 11, he hadn't spoken to them yet. And so that was going to be a next step of the process.
Okay.
And I assume if he feels like that could happen, or there was a date, I would share that with people immediately. And so that I would expect to give that update if I had it.
Sure. And I think that your update is clear. What I am not hearing is the sense of urgency in a response from the town. And that's what I'm worried about, is that this can't be delayed until September, in my mind, to make it the best possible solution for our students. We need the town, who provides us with the infrastructure for our classrooms, for our buildings. They need to act immediately so that they can secure these two classrooms, portable classrooms, so that we can hit the ground running as soon as quickly, to mobilize them into our parking lots and get them set up as quickly as possible for our students. And so I'm hoping, and I'm speaking to this body here, but I'm actually speaking to, our Holden delegation and the FinCom, to move up that meeting or set a new meeting as early as 48 hours from now, which would be Monday, and listen to this data, listen to this information, and get that contract signed.
Thanks, Laura. Jim, do you know, does the town have to sign the contract, or does the district sign the contract?
No, that would be my request. I think if one of the things we spoke about when we met, I think it was, I don't know why I want to say July 5th, but I think it was potentially July 5th or 12th. I'd have to go back and look at it. But I would have, if I knew and I had like a legal, assurance to pay or something like that, or take over the lease, I think, and I'd have to check with our attorneys, I think I could sign the lease. But I don't think I'd be doing my due diligence if I signed the lease, if I didn't. I feel like I'd be operating outside of my bounds as the superintendent of the district.
But if you have the authority to sign the lease, or the district does, then it really is just the funding, which means the FinCom can greenlight it by themselves without select board input or any other input. So that's a good thing, because it could happen potentially faster. But
and I'll be honest with you, I'm sharing my interpretation of what I think I'd be willing to do with some legal advice. I don't know how Holden would do that, how they would answer that question. We haven't gotten to that level of discussion yet.
Gotcha. Okay.
And I think the other thing I just would add on top of this is, potentially, and I think this is why I'm willing to talk about it. People may make the argument that this doesn't meet the criteria of this funding source, and I'm not saying I agree with that. I don't agree with that, but I'm just trying to be clear about that as well. That there's still a process that board goes through, even if the meeting is scheduled. I feel like it would be appropriate use of that funds, and one of the things that we did share as well is that we are trying to be good partners, and one of the things we did do, and we did not do this with this intent, but we tried to make sure that we honored our understanding and agreement in terms of giving back or making available reducing town assessments. So I'm hoping that there would be alternative means that would help support something like this. It's not why we did it. And I'll be honest with you, we didn't even have the leases at the time. But I do feel like that's important for us to acknowledge as well.
That makes sense. And of course, it's not for me to decide what the Holden Finance Committee does, but as a former Finance Committee member in Paxton, this is the kind of thing that those funds would have been used for. I agree with you that it would be appropriate. I'll just say that much. Yes. Linda, you have your hand up.
I was just going to say, we did, as part of building that partnership aspect, we as a school committee did just agree to reduce the assessments for the towns. It has been, I think, let's call it a learning experience, going through the facilities needs and working with the towns. One of the things that, and this is just like a little bit of a tangent off of this, but one of the things that has become abundantly clear from the building tours from last year to this year so far is where those relationships have been growing. And, there have been, I don't think there are so many smiles last year on these tours, but seeing where things are moving towards and where people are getting a better understanding of how the towns and the district can work together has been really encouraging. And so I'm optimistic in some regards on where we can go with what happens with Dawson, but the urgency is worrying. It's worrying to me personally for what we're looking at. Just to reiterate what Malia had brought up from that tour about the classroom spaces, is really not ideal, and those portables would just be, it's such an obvious answer to the issue that is right in front of us in black and white, clear as day. So I'm hoping that the urgency is heard.
Yep. Okay. Thanks. Anything else on Dawson before we move on?
No, I will assure you that we'll have a communication out to them. And we honestly just didn't, because we were hoping to know where some of this stuff would go. And I'm sharing with you things that happened at an 11 a.m. meeting this morning. So we're not, we really are sharing this information as live as we have it.
Okay. Thanks, Jim. I mean, to me, it sounds like you have a plan in place, and hopefully we'll move it along as quickly as possible, but it seems like a good plan.
Agreed. Thank you. The best it can be.
Okay. Linda, was there something on security requests as well?
So that's where I just wanted to make sure that we were aware of the following through from the vote from last year to this year. So, sometimes the capital requests that we really were in a lull for, I would say 2019, through 2021, I think, maybe even a little bit more, of requesting actual capital projects from the towns. So we had like the Houghton and Choxic carpet that was approved not this past year, but the year before. That's now completed, and that's just a supply chain issue, working out the kinks of the scheduling and that kind of thing. But now with the security capital requests that were put forward, some of the towns chose to put them on their town warrants. They don't have to, as a way to respond to our request as a school committee for these projects. They can fund them however they deem appropriate. So it doesn't necessarily have to go through town meeting. I think that public perception makes it a little bit trickier when it's not, because it's not as obvious that we are doing these upgrades together. And so where we left off with question marks are in Rutland and in Holden. And it sounds like the Princeton was not on the town warrant either, but it looks like it's being addressed more concretely from my point of view. So that's where I wanted to have that on everybody's radar. And in case, Jim, you had more.
I just muted myself. Yep. And so Princeton had identified a funding source prior to the town meeting, and that's why they didn't put it out there. They've assured us that they have $50,000 in funding. Mark's working on a couple things because we have the guarantee from Sterling, and they passed money to go towards that project. And now with Princeton, we are still working. We talked about it in an earlier school committee meeting that we are very much interested in trying to have similar systems or go out with common bids to have this work done, because it's in our best interest and much more efficient for the district to be using similar operating systems, or ideally with the same capacity and the same operating parameters whenever possible and whenever we can make that happen. So we're currently doing that right now in Sterling, and then also in Princeton, where Mark Wild is looking and operating on to have the most fresh and updated quotes. We also, one thing I'd share, Linda, is I have been informed by both towns that potentially they're going to look to do their own security analysis. I know that was formally shared with us when we did the Rutland tour specifically, that they're going to look not only at their school buildings, but some of the other buildings that they have in town. And so we'll see, and we've pledged our partnership and share whatever information we can to help support that. And then similarly, I've been told more offline in Holden that that's something that they were looking at. But I think that is in both cases. When we share, and one of the things we're working on in central office right now is identifying issues that we need to close and continue to push forward. Security improvements in our building is certainly one. And I feel like what we don't want, just like we don't want a different educational experience in any of our towns, we also don't want to have a difference in the baseline security we're able to provide in terms of your security or your child's security when they're coming to school every day. And we should, it's not right in the district that you have a different experience or you have different, a level of security in your child's school, depending on what town you go to. So it remains an extremely important issue for us. We've done, John Kroll did an incredible amount of work with our chiefs throughout the year. And all of our law enforcement partners, both police and fire, had signed off on the recommendations and were part of that process throughout the entire year. So we feel like we had a good approach to share with our towns. And we would advocate that we continue to kind of identify those things that were identified by our law enforcement partners as good things to add to our schools, and find a way to get them supported in those two towns, because we think it's really important. And then the other thing I have to say, I think both John and I were devastated by looking at some of the communities that were giving grant funding for this. It's frustrating. It's very frustrating, because I say this I'm saying this because one of the things that I think happened, one of the best things that happened in the district last year was the security work that happened. It started in the school committee facility subcommittee, and honestly, it was one of the major things that John Kroll took on last year. And I have a hard time believing that many districts did more work around that than we did. And so I'm frustrated that wasn't recognized and supported by the state personally. And I know I got to reach out and ask them why, because it's frustrating how much we had tried to put together for them. So.
If I can just add on that, I would really encourage you to find out, because it I don't know if the rest of the committee members have looked at the list who were awarded. It doesn't make any sense. It legitimately doesn't make any sense.
Not only does
everyone knows what we're talking about, right? That was communicated to everyone that we did the grant that we thought we were going to get, we did not receive, right? Everyone's aware of that.
Yeah. Linda, is that a list that can be shared with us?
Oh, I don't know where I saw it. It was on news coverage.
And so
okay.
I have access to it, and I will share with the committee and make it as an attachment in the superintendent's report. And I think in particular, and I'm sorry, Linda, I wasn't trying to speak over you. My apologies. I was just going to share that one of the other things that's frustrating when you look at the communities that were chosen, the reasons that were given why communities were chosen, one of which was not traditionally getting support or funding in these areas. We've never received a grant in these areas. And, you know, you know, when I look at the socioeconomic status of some of these towns, they certainly are in better shape than we are in some of these cases. And it's really frustrating. It's really frustrating. And then I would also say, John had it in on time. He probably sent, I don't know, 10 communications to the organization that was supposed to be making these decisions. Those decisions were supposed to be made, I believe, in maybe April or May, John. And they didn't make a decision until July and would not respond in kind in terms of his inquiries or saying they needed information or anything like that. And I agree with you, Linda. Like it's overwhelming the amount of stuff that we do need to do, but we have to somehow find out, you know, it didn't seem fair. And it's very frustrating because I feel like, honestly, some of the best work in the district was around security, Al's protocols, John's re-meeting with our chiefs, the things we established, the fact that we had quotes when I guarantee most of these other districts didn't. And, you know, I shared this with the town managers too. And so extremely frustrating, very frustrating and unfair, it feels like.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like it's more of that, like, you know, just as a general Wachusett thing, it just seems like that's where Wachusett falls. It's like death by 1,000 cuts. There's all of these news coverage about grants and opportunities, and when we go out for it, it's just automatic rejection, it seems like. So, or not even allowed to apply in the first place. So if there is a way to find out what they're looking for, and if it's like a name change, you know, maybe that's where we go.
I said it was blind. So they had, when they were talking about, when I had spoken with the contact that was running the grant, she had said it's a blind process. They don't see names and whatnot. I have no idea if that's true, but Jim's point about like there were constant delays. Like I think originally, Jim, it might have even been March. She had said that we'd hear back, and then it was April, and then it was July. Like finally, I will say we'll keep pressing forward, right? There's going to be other grants out there, and there's also, I don't know if you're familiar with the initiative that Matthew McConaughey has started. He's from Uvalde, and so he put together a whole foundation and organization to make this whole process easier for school districts to access grant funds without going through a ton of steps. So we're definitely going to be exploring those and pushing forward.
And I do think we need to commit to continuing to pursue grants wherever possible. And so it was the right thing to do. I appreciate all John's work on it. John, anybody who's seen John's work, it's outstanding. So, but it's frustrating we weren't chosen.
All right, I think I said Janice hand up and then Malias.
Just a quick question on grants. First of all, John, thank you for all of that work. We appreciate it, even if it didn't quite work out this year, but I appreciate all the work that you did. I know it's for the district, but since it's buildings and the funds would be coming from the towns, are these grants beyond just DESI ones that the towns could look into or could help us write? I know the towns are always looking for ways to save money, and since it sort of falls into their pocketbooks, instead of them complaining that they don't have the money for certain things or putting it all on us, is that something that we can ask them to look into and also support the schools in that way? I don't know if that's a possibility.
And so a good example is some of the work, and we're trying to firm up. There's been a couple of times we've had on the agenda the Green Communities grant program, and then we're going to make Princeton wants to add the Thomas Prince School to that program. And then I've also had some conversations with Austin, who's the new town manager in Rutland. He's also going to pursue a Green Communities grant and would like us to agree to have our schools part of that as well. And so I do think those conversations are happening. We were the ones who could apply for this particular grant. It was done in partnership with the towns. I mean, Gary Kelleher was one of the ones who was really encouraging and doing some of the work with us. We actually had invited, and our own representatives were informed of that we were doing this as well. So need to continue to do it. And I would agree with you, hopefully with the town seeing that, you know, we were willing to write the grant when it was under our auspices, that we continue to have them think of us when they have grant monies available as well. Princeton, honestly, is one of the leaders around some of that. Like, I think we're thrilled that TPS is going to be added to the Green Communities program, because it's going to allow us to look at some of the needs of that facility and have an alternative funding source to support some of that work. So I think it makes a ton of sense, and I agree with you. Like, we need to, continue to do it on both sides. When we can lead the grant work, we should be willing to do it, and when the towns can, hoping they're going to do it for us as well. It's in everybody's best interest.
Thanks. Malia?
Okay. So, so I was very frustrated by that too. One of my questions and one of the challenges that I think we have run into for years is that we have not done a lot of advocacy in the past. And unfortunately, one of our strongest advocates that we did have in Boston is now no longer our state senator, which is really unfortunate. But I wonder if we could still reach out to her, perhaps for her knowledge, perhaps in her new role, because 2 of our towns are considered rural technically. And perhaps we don't get rural funding because our district as a whole is not, but perhaps reach out to her about some of these needs that overlap with her current work and her knowledge, and see if that may be something she could offer some thoughts on or help us figure out inroads to advocate. Because I don't think we had a lot of specific conversations. We did not do a lot of advocacy in the past. We need to do a lot more. We are the largest regional in the state. I know Jim knows this, but we were never sitting at the hearings when we should have been on many things, because we're the regional transportation that just got bumped up. Most schools don't, I mean, they care a little, but they don't really care because it's like, $100,000. It's like $700,000 difference in what was in the proposed budget versus the final budget for us. That's a huge difference, and no other district has that. So I think even with this, we fall into a case where we don't have a lot of people advocating for us in Boston. We are not on the radar because we haven't put ourselves on the radar for many, many years. And we also are perceived, and I hear this every day along with the school lunch and the equity conversation, we're perceived as being wealthy communities in a wealthy district. We are not. We are not by our budget. We are not by our income of our households. Our district is way more diverse in income than people think. And that is a challenge for anyone. But I think we fall into this pocket where people don't think we need things. And so I guess I'm urging us to perhaps have or several really targeted discussions. I see this every day when I see the earmarks that come through, some of which are for security projects or things like roofs in districts that don't need the state money. So we need to find out how to get in those conversations and how to have more of a voice in Boston, even though we're not there. So maybe we need to have a forum with our legislators, not just the ongoing conversation, but I think maybe a conversation with Anne would be really helpful in figuring out how we can help straddle this divide, because it is part of her current job. Because we kind of fall in this.
We're in the wonderful, horrible middle. And
we're in the middle in many ways.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so I couldn't agree more with you, Malia. And, I do feel like, especially in long-term strategy, we need to do more advocacy work. I was thrilled that the committee made the recommendation and has the, I'm not going to have the right word, the proclamation or the recommendation for Mass Building Authority. I think that's a powerful, and I think we have done more of that work. This committee specifically, I don't want to say district. I feel like the former Senator Goby was very helpful and supportive. I felt the same way about Representative Ferguson and Representative Kilcoyne. And I think that they will be good partners. And I think we have had some conversations with them, and they were part of the security grants request. And so hoping to build on that, because I think we do need to understand that we are positioned as the largest regional and that we want to be hitting it on all fronts, right? Advocacy and support, and then also, grants and all of those things. So fully agree. One thing I would say to you in part, And again, it's because it's the right thing and I want to support our families, but some of that identification work too maybe more properly identifies our school population, the needs of our district. And I think that's important too. And so that helps us with Student Opportunity Act. It would also help us with Title I. And so, there's a lot of layers that I think we can work on in terms of advocating for all of our students. And that's a piece of it, both the advocacy work and then make sure they're properly their level of need. And if they are being placed at risk, that's properly quantified in the district. So.
Okay, thanks. I think we should move on because we're in the interest of time. Linda, is there anything that for the agenda on Monday that you wanted to add? I'm just trying to ask everybody. If there is, please reach out.
No, not for this time.
Okay, cool. Legal affairs, Lauren.
Everybody sit back, take a deep breath. I have a very boring update for you compared to all of that. So legal affairs hasn't met since we did interviews for new legal counsel. I myself, in discussions with Dr. Riley, have gotten very good feedback on the new legal counsel, and I know they've helped with many issues so far, so I'm very happy to hear that. Currently, we only have one expired contract, or two expired contracts, actually. That would be our custodial and clerical contracts. And even though we are having, some things with our HR office right now, we are going to move forward with those negotiations kind of as quickly as possible. So we're attempting to coordinate right now with legal counsel to get that process moving. And then I just have one more thing, Jim, and then for the rest of this year, expiring in June of 2024 will be the administrators union, the ABAPAs, and the paraprofessionals. So at some point in the year, we will start those negotiations as well to kind of keep up. We are also working and trying to make sure that we have updated, clean agreement documents so that everybody's working on a very clean one document, not lots of MOAs attached to things. So we're coordinating with legal counsel and the unions to get that process moving along well. That's all. I think Jim had something to add.
Just going to share that we did meet with that unit, express our interest, and let them know where we stood in the process. We also shared again, Lauren, today, just to let you know, to legal counsel, please send us some dates. They know we're going to be ready to go. When he sends us dates, we'll be sharing them with you. So just adding that extra piece that we did follow up on both of those meetings, and we should hopefully have some potential dates for you soon.
Great. Thanks.
Thanks, Jim. And Lauren, I don't think you have anything for Monday. In fact, we're actually not going to have executive session for the first time in a while.
Nope.
So that'll be speed things up a little bit on Monday's meeting. Okay. All right. Moving on to superintendent goals and evaluation. Laura.
Thank you. So we have a meeting scheduled for August 24th. And we are going to be looking at our timeline and our process and our documents that have been used previously, and also looking at reviewing the policy that guides us, which is policy 1312, evaluation of the superintendent. A couple of things that I think are relevant in that policy, and I just want to highlight a few things. The deadline for the cycle is April 30th. And I know that in last year's cycle, some members have articulated that it seems like it comes up too soon, right? It's not quite to the end of the school year, but it's there because of town elections. And some mentioned that it makes sense to have the current school committee evaluating the superintendent rather than waiting until some new people are on who haven't been involved in the prior process. So I don't expect that there'll be a change on that front in terms of a date and moving that out. But what I'm hoping to do is start the process sooner. And that's one of the reasons why I spoke to Jim about this, is that, we're going to organize ourselves, and we're going to hopefully be able to present to the school committee for their approval goals on sooner, rather than I think we've done this in like October sometime. So if we can bump that up, into September, then that would be, I think, a good place, with the idea that maybe we can get sooner and sooner, so that it seems like more of a continuous cycle rather than just a something we have to do. I would also, I'm also going to speak to the committee about looking into whether or not it's prudent to look at a 2-year cycle for superintendents who have been in our district for 3 consecutive years, much like we do with professional status teachers. Put them on a 2-year cycle rather than a 1-year cycle. And then also look at, obviously this is not necessarily my own opinion, not a conversation for our current superintendent, but put some language in there potentially for superintendents that are not meeting expectations, with some sort of corrective action measures, similarly to what is done for teachers and so forth. So those are some thoughts that are moving, that I'm going to that are going to be part of the discussion with how we can kind of enhance this policy and make it more meaningful for our superintendent and also for our committee moving forward. That's it.
Any questions for Laura? And there's nothing, sorry, there's none of this that has to go for Monday, though, for the full committee, right, Laura?
No, we're not even meeting until after that meeting. So there's nothing for Monday. I hope to have something for our next meeting, for the next school committee meeting, full school committee meeting. But I won't know until after that. I'm not sure we'll be prepared to have goals presented and approved at that particular point. That would be September. But hopefully that's kind of what I'm hoping to accomplish.
Okay, thank you. All right, so let's move on. So the next agenda item was actually also from Laura. You'd asked to talk about an organizational chart for central office, Laura?
Scott,
Oh, sorry, there was a question.
can I pop in with one quick committee update that's not really listed, because business and finance hasn't met?
Yep.
I just wanted to update that AAB is meeting next week. Sort of that's under business and finance, but since we hadn't met, it hasn't gone through there. But we're meeting next week. We were hoping we might have a report at some point by this meeting, but obviously we don't. But Michelle also felt strongly, and we've had some inquiries from people on the AAB from the towns, that they really wanted to meet, talk about kind of where things are, get an update, and we want to adhere to our guidelines that say we need to meet a certain number of times a year, and really have those discussions about where we are and what our plan is. So we're meeting next Wednesday, as long as we can get quorum. So cross your fingers. Thank you.
Thanks, Malia. All right, so now we're moving on to central office organizational chart. So I think, Laura, you'd asked to put this on the agenda.
Thanks. I think actually Jim alluded to this in terms of communicating to the community the method of initiating a communication. But I think that it's worthwhile for us to also have it as a, clearly articulated, like who we should go to, what should be the process for us in communicating to the central office. I believe that our communication, because you, Jim, we're the body that oversees you, I believe that all of our initiation has to go through you. But it also feels like there's a disconnect, because you're often inundated with things. So I'm wondering how we streamline the process of communication and ensure that that you are not getting inundated with individual concerns where people, where, how am I going to say this? Where individuals of this committee are not acting for the full committee, right? Like we should be acting as one body. And so perhaps I'm answering my question is, should we be all communicating through you, Scott, only, and then to Jim? And I think that might help alleviate this. So I'd just like to initiate a conversation about how we should go about communicating.
I think even before Jim and Sherry answer, I'd just like to add that I have a similar concern, and I almost wanted to talk about it as part of the committee member handbook, but I think we need more guidance for members about knowing when you can go to administration and when it's not really appropriate, because none of us really has the authority to do anything other than as a parent or a citizen, unless it comes through the committee. But this is a discussion I do agree that we need to have. But Sherry, I did see your hand up.
It does say in our policy that if we have any complaints or anything coming from the public, that we are to bring them directly to the superintendent. Mm-hmm. Just from a time perspective, I know, Jim, that you don't have a lot of time, but I wouldn't say that bringing them to the chair is necessarily a good idea either, because being in a volunteer position that already takes up a significant amount of time, I can't imagine going through and deciding where things should go. As much as we don't want to inundate the superintendent, I also would be careful of people inundating other members of central office staff, mm-hmm. Which I think could very easily happen if we were to say, to give the committee the options to email whoever they wanted. I would rather see Jim or Randy or someone delegating to other people rather than having it go through the chair or having it go through them.
Jim is raising his hand physically. I can see
well,
it.
I don't, not that I'm trying to. I'm not trying to jump the line, Malia. And I was trying so hard to model. Laura was wonderful early on. Like she raised her hand. I'm like, oh, I got to do that too. I just wanted to respond to what you've all said. And yes, yes, and yes. And one of the things that I've identified, I'm working with my coach with, and honestly, Randy and I have a meeting on Friday, and something that John and I have spoken with and Joan's become involved in. For our part in the district, yes, I personally see us in terms of communication procedures, protocols that we're going to be following in central office. I almost see us sharing that as part of the school committee to put it on the website, let people know, hey, if you have a concern about this isn't talking about school committee, this is talking about parents or other constituents about where they can go. And then also to know that if they connect to our office, and Randy and I are going to work on this together, that we're going to ask some questions, have you spoken to somebody at the school, or who have you met with? Have you referred this to the appropriate department? So we're going to try to put some things in place where people get in contact with the right people to get answers to their questions as quickly as possible, but also know that we are willing, if in an event they feel like they followed the proper procedures, and at this point they feel like they need to advocate or appeal a decision or something like that, that they have a process where they can meet with me or go through Randy to do so. And so that's what I would share in terms of that process, in which I have a decent level of confidence. And I agree with Sherry, it'd be hard to go through the chair just because we ask so much of all of you, quite frankly, in terms of the time you give to us. I mean, for goodness sakes, it's almost 9 o'clock in the middle of summer, and you're all here, that's incredible. And so I'm comfortable that we can do some improvements on our level if people direct it through our office, that we will find a way with Randy, and I'm going to enlist Randy in this, and helping me get it to the right people who can respond in a timely manner and are responding with the appropriate information, and making sure that I just don't want to skip the school or skip the department like we talked about earlier. In terms of the committee, yeah, I understand your concern, and I think that's a good conversation to have. I think the committee is, Scott and I spoke about, honestly, earlier this week. If the committee charges us with doing something, we need to do it. But in terms of if the committee's not charging us, it can be blurred lines, whether it's a school committee function or a private citizen action. And I think those are good discussions personally for the committee to have, I think, yes.
Did Malia have her hand up? Malia?
So, okay. So, I guess what comes to me, there's several things, and you just said something. So what comes to my mind is that I think there's several different types of communication that we are responsible for as school committee members. There is something in our guidelines that specifically says that part of our role as a school committee member is to share constituent concerns with the superintendent. Specifically, it's in several different places. I don't know if it's a state law or our policy, but that's something we need to consider. And I know myself, when I get a concern and I don't have the answer and it's beyond me, I don't want to speak for the committee. So I always say constituent concern and send it on to usually Jim, but occasionally Ideal Special Education. So sometimes I'll send it to Joan or whoever was before, Christine or whoever was before Joan. But most things I send to Jim and then they get to the right person. And that's how I've handled the constituent concerns, because I don't want to speak for the district. I just share them. I don't assume. I think there's another category of communication regarding subcommittee business, because we're all chairs and we all have certain people we work with on subcommittee business and have conversations on an ongoing basis with. And I think that's a different kind of communication. And then I think there's also, and this is where my concern is, and I don't know if this is where this originated from, but individuals asking general questions not related to one of those two things that just randomly send, and sometimes we all know, harassing basically people with slews of emails and questions that have not gone through committee or subcommittee discussions, and they're not a chair and they're just asking questions for whatever reason. And so I think that's the problematic component that we need to figure out how to tackle. I don't, and I also, when I hear Jim talking about Randy, I know we've talked about this in various settings for a couple of years. I appreciate that Randy has to be an essential part of this, but I also know that we have also had issues in the past when Randy goes on vacation, things don't get done, and I feel bad. I had to bother you about a meeting this week because Randy was on vacation, last week. So I think we need to figure out I don't want to put too much work on Randy, who's already doing things, to sort things out and be the only gatekeeper per se for some of this, because if she's out, that creates that's a whole nother area beyond just communication, but she is our communication person right now. And when she is unavailable, we literally come to a standstill. I mean, I know that you and central office can still get things done, you and the other senior administrators, but as a school committee, we literally cannot get anything done. We can't hold meetings, we can't reserve meetings, we can't tentatively hold meetings, we can't get documents, we literally can't do anything when Randy is out. And so I think we need to, if this is going to be part of her role in sorting some of this out, there needs to be some plan for when she is not available as well. So that's my few thoughts in the interest of time. Thank you.
Thanks. Linda?
So I was expecting a little bit of a different conversation around this agenda item, just by how it's listed. I was assuming that it meant in terms of kind of a continuation from what we talked about at the January budget retreat about the central office having a skeletal staff, and that most districts proportionally would have, or actually disproportionately, have way more administrators and people, like actual people in their central office, when they have a much smaller student and teacher population than we do. And that's where I thought that this conversation was going, was how to build up the staff and the administrators that need to be in central office, and what do you need, and where do we need to be going. And I mean, I agree that communication trajectories have a big part of that, and where, I think clarifying that process for both the community and for committee operations and so on is important. But I was assuming that this was going to be about the work that you all are doing in central office, and how can we as a school committee make sure that the operations are going to be going forward as you need them, and what could the school committee do for that? So that's where I would like to see us work towards in the future. And knowing where we are now, as you probably have guessed by now, I'm a big fan of getting the baseline and knowing where we are and then moving from there. So that's what I was hoping we could talk about or get the ball rolling on.
Yeah, so I think this is my fault. I sort of munched two things together, and yeah, so it's not clear. So I do know you wanted to talk about that, Linda. So I think that is worth talking about, and I've sort of my fault not making the agenda clear. But I agree that we should talk more and follow up on that discussion we had at the budget planning meeting.
Yeah, I'd love to, Linda, and I think in I made reference briefly about our identification, even though right now, we're supporting human resources in a different way. I do feel like long term, we really need to perhaps have somebody who directly reports to me in terms of our employee systems. We are skeletal staffed down here. Very thankful that we've added a director of curriculum position. I think it's going to make a difference. I think it's important for us to be transparent about the reorg. Now we're going to have a director of student support services who's more married to special education, not in the sense that, like I shared, the job description really is the same. It's just us putting out the idea that we have to stop putting students in buckets and give kids what they need, whether or not they're eligible for special education or found eligible for special education, just what they need. So I think we should do everything that everyone talked about. And I also agree with what Malia had said earlier. I'm personally, I would just share with you all, I feel like it's important that chairs directly communicate with the identified person who's in the organization and can work on agendas and have conversations around that. And perhaps the first step for us is to show our updated org chart, share our kind of communication procedures that we're putting into place. I'm sharing with you all that Randy's going to be a part of that. And that's just because I need her when I'm not going to be there in the morning. There are times where I have just meeting after meeting after meeting. And I want to do a better job of knowing if something's going on to be able to be responsive to it or get people to the right place. But then I would also say I need to be honest and candid, Linda, to your point, that we need to continue to look at, nobody's trying to build a bureaucratic monster down here. And I believe like the right thing to do always is to make sure you are using the resources that have been provided to you at a level that you feel is optimal. And I started tonight when I gave the superintendent's report talking about the work ethic that I see in our business department, in our HR department, and to just say this isn't about people not caring, and this is not about people not working hard. People working extremely hard. I think people would be amazed that the hours that a lot of people are putting in down here in the middle of summer. And we may not be here at 9 o'clock every night, but this place, and it's not always me. There's somebody down here usually most nights at 5:30, 6 o'clock. Somebody is. And so it's not about effort. And unfortunately, because it's not about effort, there's always a systems piece, make sure you're doing the stuff as efficiently as possible. I do think we need to acknowledge that in certain areas we're going to need, when you're supporting a district of approximately, and we will be over 7,000 students in no time, and about 1,200 employees, you're talking about a very large organization. And quite frankly, we do not have the staffing that most places have to support the 25th largest district in the state. And that does, Linda, thank you for bringing it up. And, it's hard for us because there are a lot of things we need to add. And honestly, we are all here. One of the things I love about the central office group is they're all really committed to kids, and it's hard. And I don't, I mean it about the bureaucracy. We're not looking to add management people, and really because we know we need to do so much to support our students. We don't have effective tier 2 supports effectively in this district. And I've said it a million times, we're so reliant on our classroom teachers. We're a system of classroom teachers and special education. So it's hard for us when we know we don't have those student supports in place, to talk about central office, but it does need to be part of the conversation, because we're not going to be able to move forward and support our employees and make them feel like they do matter, and make sure we're not making mistakes in terms of their jobs. This is their livelihood, and we need to do a better job with that. And then I would also say some of what we need to do in district does have to do with planning. The strategic planning is extremely important. It's extremely important that we continually look at our curriculum, some of the work we're doing in social emotional curriculum. And then also, I don't know if there's a more important decision we're going to make than the selection of an ELA curriculum replacement that we're going to make. It could be one of the most vital decisions we're going to make in the next 10 years. And so a lot of this work is governed and led through central office. It involves other people out in the schools, but it's led through central office. And it is an important thing that we continue to educate people about, because what people think is we have a lot more than we do, both in our schools and then also in our central office. And so I appreciate the opportunities, and I need to take advantage of those opportunities to also make the public and the full committee aware of this is our status. This is where we are. This is the context we are trying to help kids in, and to continue to advocate not only to do things better, but in some ways to get some additional resources. And we tried to do that. And I think we were successful in that through the budget this year, and our town supported us. And I'm very thankful for that. And one of the things I think we've tried to do and we will continue to do is base those things on data. I think it's powerful when we look at the number of administrators we have in this district compared to the state, compared to our DART peers, and compared to other regional schools. And it's not only use those same comparisons when we look at our guidance people. So there's ample opportunity. Thank you, honestly, for recognizing that those are some issues for us. And we're going to continue to try to do a better job to communicate where we are and where we might need to make some changes.
So I think, Jim, I think Linda was going here. I think maybe this is an appropriate conversation for management to continue to have, for this subcommittee to have over the fall, is just, you were talking about how we compare to other districts. I know you had gotten some of those numbers previously. I think maybe it would be appropriate for this subcommittee to look more deeply into those numbers, and maybe talk about some recommendations from you about where we might need to add some people, and have those discussions here. So I think maybe for our next meeting, or over the fall, that might be a continuing discussion we could have.
Absolutely love that. That would be wonderful.
Great. So I think that's a really good segue, if everyone's okay with moving on to I asked Jim to do just a brief update on the strategic plan. We're not going to get a lot of detail, and we only have 5 minutes left anyway, but just give us an outline of what we're planning in terms of timeline and some of the expectations you have for the next couple of months.
Yep, I'm gonna hand it over to my more knowing other, John Kroll, who's led some of this work. We've identified a consultant who will be working with us. We've had a couple of meetings with that person, Michael Sullivan, and John actually had another meeting with principals today. Has had a couple of meetings with principals over the last couple of days, but John's going to give a more eloquent, articulate 10,000 view about strategic planning where we're at. I would say that on our radar, Scott, is to give a presentation of the strategic plan timeline. We have one in draft form, and we'll be presenting it to the full committee, and honestly may have Michael Sullivan, who's our identified consultant for this process, present to the full committee in September. But John, probably he's the best source for this. John, if you don't mind talking about where we're at.
Sure, I'll make it in broad strokes because of the timing. So essentially, like, what we're doing is we're putting together a timeline and a draft of a plan that's going to incorporate as much stakeholder feedback as possible. Like, I think that would be like the number one thing that I would want you to know, is that we're trying to involve stakeholders at every level, whether they be school committee members, administrators, teachers, students, parents, community members, right? Like everybody. And so the more feedback we get from everybody, the stronger the plan will be, because it also, you're getting buy-in from everybody at all of those angles as well. So Jim talked about the committed people we have working at central office, and we have equally committed people in our buildings, right? And so I had thrown out the idea to the principals, if anybody wanted to work on this with me over the course of the summer, that they were welcome to, and more than half of the principals have taken us up on that offer. So We're right now in the process of putting together plans for our principal retreat next week, as well as staff opening days, August 28th and 29th, and a big component is going to be around strategic planning. And so we're going to be looking for help from the school committee, and other members to put together additional. I don't want to use the word task force because we're already using that for other things, but planning committees and steering committees and that sort of thing. So our goal is to conduct a ton of research in qualitative research and quantitative research in the district, collect data, and put together a strategic plan that's going to help us really identify our needs and pick away at those needs over the next 3 years. And the hope is to finish that process by the end of, well, I'd say the beginning of January, so that we can work on, incorporating that work into the budget process for FY25.
John, thank you. The only thing I'd add is there will be a component of strategic planning on our first PD day with teachers, and that is in the works, and that's going to be one of them, I'd say 2 or 3, most likely 2 major items that they look at that day. And I think what we want stakeholders to know is you will be included as well. We're doing that with our staff because one of the reasons why we had an additional PD day added to our contract is because we only have limited time with our teachers and the input that we can get. And so I think that's important to know. And so thank you, John. But John's been great about that, and the principals have been wonderful.
All right. Thank you. And I'm sure we'll be hearing more about that and I think the full committee would appreciate a quick update on where we're going with this and the timeline too. So that might be something to consider for Monday's meeting.
We're going to do it, Scott.
Yeah,
we're going to do it and let them know the focus of both the administrative retreat and that first day PD in terms of the things we're working on. And then we're looking for a way to share some of the draft form of the timeline, but we got to work on it. We don't want, we want to make sure it's tight and accurate. But we've done a fair amount of work on it.
Okay, great, thanks. So committee member handbook, this was the discussion that we just had around communication and like what was appropriate for people to do and where they should go with questions. That's some of the discussion that I wanted to have. I'd like to hold this for our next meeting and discuss it further. It just came, one of the things that had me want it on the agenda was there was a few instances recently where individual members were asking members of administration for some pretty in-depth information and information that we didn't have at our fingertips. And I just think for some members, it's a matter of training and understanding what your role is, and that you don't necessarily have the right to ask any member of the administration to prepare reports for you with a lot of data. And it's coming from
Was that a mic drop on purpose?
Right at 9 o'clock.
I think he needs to put another dime in the machine.
There he is.
All right, so my phone battery died, so that's fun. So I'm back here. We'll see if I freeze on my computer again. In any case, I think we should hold this agenda item and discuss
Go. Oh, you dropped out at the part we want to hear, man. Where go back.
Really? I don't know where I dropped, but I was just saying that from several different members of the committee have asked for stuff, and I think it's somewhat a matter of not understanding what you can ask for and what you shouldn't really be asking for as a committee member. Some things, like if you're going to ask for it, you need to bring it to the full committee. We can vote on it. If the committee votes that this is something that we want, then the administration does it. But anyway, I think these are all things that would be helpful to have in a handbook. So that's good for new people and as a reference for other people. So I'm going to think more about it over the next month, and I think we should continue talking about it. That's the discussion that I wanted to have. Okay. The last thing that we had was master calendar. This again is something I think was a holdover from last year, but I think it was Linda who asked me to put it on the agenda. Is that right?
Yeah, so I just was wondering, I haven't had a chance to look at the update, but I wanted to make sure that that was something that was still useful to be collecting, to make sure that we as a committee know what our deadlines are and what to anticipate for building agendas and so on. I don't know if it's been shared with you, Scott, as new chair, or how it's been if it's been helpful, if there's any feedback, and we can discuss that however you see fit.
Yeah, it has been shared with me, and I know Randy uses it too to sort of help with setting up the agendas for the meetings. So it has been very helpful. I think it's great that this subcommittee continues to update it, and yeah, maybe just in the interest of time, I'd suggest discussing it more at our next meeting, I think. All right. That brings us to new business. I'm trying to get us out of here on time, or almost on time. Does anyone have any new business for this subcommittee? Malia.
So I have one thing which I probably will. It's come up in business and finance, but I'm just mentioning it to put it on the radar. I've seen the question of us approving gifts and grants has come up a number of times, and specifically related to PTOs and PTAs. And I know it was originally on a radar to maybe be something we did this year. I'm starting to see notices for PTA fundraisers. So it reminded me that it probably requires some additional discussion, but without creating a burden on our business office, I think it is within our realm as a school committee to ask for this information, like monthly, perhaps in some way, just to have a report that we can approve, because that is what our job is. And I wanted to at least bring that up early in the year to figure out how we do that and at what level without creating too much excess work, because it is part of our job. And it's come up for a couple of years and keeps kind of not getting done. And we're at the beginning of the year, so this would be the time to do it if we plan to put out some sort of request. So I'm just raising that as a question because it does involve various aspects of the school committee, and I'm sure business and finance can talk about it as well. But I wanted it to be on the radar because we are seeing those things, and this is the time to make that request.
I'm going to put it in as an item too, Malia. When you started talking about it, I grabbed a pen and wrote some stuff down. We're going to share some business with the principals at the administrative retreat, and I will provide a reminder because I do think the district needs to do a better job that when we receive gifts or grants or donations, we really should be formally bringing them forward to school committee whenever possible. And so we'll provide that reminder to them as well. I know we have to do other stuff, but make sure I do communicate that reminder.
Okay. Any other new business? All right. So the only other thing we have is to set a date for the next meeting. Someone gave me the idea that I thought this was a really good idea that this subcommittee should meet sort of the Monday before each of our regular school committee meetings. So I would propose, I have to look on the calendar and I have too many tabs open, that we meet the Monday before the next regular school committee meeting. Does that work for people?
That's Labor Day.
Oh, so we're not doing it Labor Day. So, all right.
And Tuesday the 5th is the joint facilities and business and finance meeting.
How's Wednesday of that week for people?
It's open on the calendar.
Okay.
Yeah, the only Wednesday is fine, obviously, but that puts a time crunch on making any changes to the agenda. So
it does. We always have until Thursday at 3. That's the deadline. But yeah.
I don't plan around me, but I have a conflict that night because the first Wednesday I have meetings every first Wednesday.
Okay.
So you can do what you'd like around me, but just letting you know.
So like I said, I would like to do it the Monday before the school committee meeting whenever we can. And I'm going to ask Randy to put that on for like the year, unless it's a holiday or something. Obviously Labor Day we can't do. But I think probably Wednesday sounds like our best bet for this next month. I do want to do it in time so that we can have agenda items if we want to for the school committee meeting. And I would rather not do it in August because I'm sure it's going to be hard to get people together that last week before school gets back. All right. So we'll plan for that Wednesday for this next meeting. And then please, my goal will be Monday evenings, the week before the school committee meeting going forward, unless there's a holiday or some reason we can't do it. Okay. Any other things that anyone wants to share before we adjourn? All right. So Last thing I would just add before we end is anyone has suggestions for running these meetings. I'm newer to this even than being the school committee chair. So please, I'm open for any feedback that you'd like to give me or suggestions about running these meetings. So please reach out to me. And other than that, I would accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
I saw Jana and Laura. All right, so we're going to go to a roll call vote, and I'm going to read you as I see on my screen. Malia,
Yes.
Linda Woodland,
Woodland, yes.
Laura Kirschenbaum,
Kirschenbaum, yes.
Jana Brennan,
Brennan, yes.
Sherry Haber,
Haber, yes.
and Lauren Salmon Garrett.
Sammy Garrett, yes.
And the chair votes yes. We are abstained. We are we're adjourned.
Thank you
I will
all.
see you all on Monday.
Maybe we're abstaining.
Enjoy your
too.
vacation, Scott.
Yes.
Yeah, you're on
Bye.
vacation. Go.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Have a good
Bye.
vacation.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.